A warm welcome to Yasmine Ouirhrane and Deeyah Khan. I'm so happy to see you today. Our awardee, our Schwarzkopf Awardee from this year, 2020, Deeyah Khan, we are so humbled to have you today. But also Yasmine Ouirhrane, the Young European of the Year 2019. I'm so much looking forward to this conversation. One day we will meet, of course, after the pandemic in person. But I will hand over to Yasmine. We have 1 hour and I go back into hiding.
Thank you so much, Esther. Welcome everybody and welcome Deeyah Khan. I'm very, very honored to have you today. Deeyah, you are a film director, but you're also a two-time Emmy Award winner and the founder of the production company Fuse, and also the founder and editor-in-chief of Sisterhood magazine, which is a magazine that spotlights the voice and the diverse voice of women with Muslim heritage. So we're very, very happy to have you. And I congratulate you on winning the Schwarzkopf Europe Award. And
thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. It's such an honor and so touching to be here with you. I'm so inspired and so humbled. And a huge part of this excitement for me is also to get to meet you because I'm a big fan of yours. And I so appreciate and find it so important what you are doing. So just to have a reason to also get to do this with you, I'm really, really grateful. So thank you. And thank you to the jury and to the Schwarzkopf Foundation. I'm just, when I found out about this, I was a little bit confused. Because I was going, why? There are so many people doing such amazing work. You know, initially I thought, oh, it's probably a bit of a mistake, or, you know, they've got some sort of confusion going on. You know, and then also, you know, once I learned more about the foundation itself as well, it means a lot to me. I'm so grateful. So thank you. Yeah,
and you have all the legitimacy, I would say, to win the award, I would say, and I'm not being objective here, but also because I found out of your work a few years ago, and I would like to introduce it to our audience. So very young, you found yourself in the middle of two polarizing narratives in Europe. You grew up in Norway, and these narratives where you were in the middle of them they mostly come from men, and they see you they come either from your own community and see you as, you know, as a woman who wants freedom, and maybe you being criticized because of your you seeking freedom, and then against your community as a brown woman. So my first question for you would be, how did you come at peace with your different identities back then?
You know, it was when I was much younger, when I was a child, I thought that my multiple identities were a strength, that it was a source of my kind of power in a way. I always used to say that, you know, it's my superpower, because I felt that coming from all these different perspectives, being able to stand in those stories and those experiences fully, at least in my mind, gave me the ability to understand more people. I could sit with my grandfather and relate to him and understand him and feel with him. And I could similarly sit with, you know, my white Norwegian friends who were growing up with, you know, music videos and this kind of, you know, TV shows or whatever, like that kind of experience, and fully relate and fully feel and be with people like that. And so I felt that was a strength. I felt I was almost like a bridge. And I used to think maybe I can sometimes, if there are misunderstandings between the different groups, maybe I will be able to almost translate what someone else feels or what someone else is going through. So when I was much younger, that's what I used to think. It's a good thing. But as I got older and older, and I started, sort of society would teach me that that I'm not good enough because I am brown skinned. I'm not good enough because I'm Muslim. I'm not good enough because I'm the child of immigrants. I'm not good enough because the food my parents eat smells like this, or the clothes they wear looks like that, or the poetry that they read sounds different. And similarly, you know, as you say, you know, from my family's, my parents' kind of community, on the Muslim side of it, you know, I would then also be taught by them that I'm also not good enough because I'm a girl. And as a girl, I should not do this and I cannot do that. And I should only stay within these limits. So I found myself, the older I got, that all my different identities were not a space of bridging. It was not a space where I could be myself and I could be with other people and understand everybody. It was a place where I was put into boxes. It was, my identities became my limitations and not my freedom. It became limitations, and it became rooted in what everybody else expected from me. So it became the roles that I have to play in life so that I'm good enough, or so that I'm acceptable, and so that people don't find me to be a problem. So I feel like I would shrink myself. I feel like I would, rather than just being who I am, I feel like I would make myself smaller and more diminished and more palatable and acceptable for everybody else. And to be honest with you, I spent most of my life playing those roles, trying to satisfy everybody else, to the point where I just realized I cannot live like that anymore, because my insides were not dying, but they were breaking. You know, I was starting to break from the inside, because when you're not yourself, when you're not living fully and truthfully to who you actually are, and following your own heart rather than everyone else's list of expectations of you, of what a woman can be, what a child of immigrant can be, what a brown person can be or cannot be, it does something to you. It takes something from you, and it is yourself, who you truly are. But whenever I would find kind of solace in a way from all of that on the outside, would be through creative expression. So that's the only times where I felt that all my different identities actually was my space of creativity. So that's where it was okay. But then whenever I would step outside of that and walk into the world, it was no longer okay anymore.
Because you were
so I don't know if that answer. I don't know if that answer. Yeah.
You did very well, because you were labeled, you know, and constantly put into those boxes. So when people have this preconceived perception of who Deeyah is, then they take away your freedom from self-defining who you are. And so through, as you say, through creativity, you found your, I would say, balance. And you were a singer by the age of 8, so very young you started singing. But this also caused you to have to leave Norway because of this, and you moved to the UK. How was this? And what did you learn from this? And how did you also overcome this?
It was really hard, because I was very young. I was 17, and I felt very alone. And I felt on the outside of everything, of all the groups. I felt like I was not Norwegian enough. I felt like I was not white enough. I felt like I was not Muslim enough. I was not brown enough. I was not Pakistani enough. I was not Afghan enough. Like, I felt like it was whatever it was, I was not enough, because I felt, rather than belonging to any of the groups, I felt like I fell between all of them. And I felt I wasn't able to satisfy people's expectations of me in a way that they would accept me, in a way that they would treat me in a way that I actually belong. So it was very, very difficult. I did move to London, and the reason I actually wanted to move to London is because I had been to London when I was 12 years old with my mother. And for the first time, I saw people that looked like me, and I saw people that looked also different from me, and I saw lots of different people. I felt like I saw sort of glimpses of the entire world in London, in different places. And I really liked it. I really, even at the age of 12, I really liked the fact that I don't stand out in a sort of bad way, where people look at you like, you know, who are you? What are you doing here? That kind of a look, which I often felt when I was growing up in Norway, growing up with a lot of racism. So that's why I wanted to come to London, but it was very difficult. It was very lonely. And I was desperately, you know, seeking support. I wish that somebody would have stood up next to me. I wish that somebody would have said that it's going to be okay. I wish that somebody would have said that you are okay. But, you know, life doesn't always give you what you want. So instead, what I had to learn from that is to is to try and eventually become that for other people. So, you know, I wasn't able to do that for myself, and other people were not able to do it for me. But I think most of my life since then, I've tried to create little spaces or opportunities or environments where I can try and be that for other people, or I can let people know you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay, and I stand with you. No one else maybe stands with you. That's okay, but at least I stand with you for whatever that's worth. Because solidarity, I think, is what I learned then, and what happens to somebody when there's a lack of solidarity, when people don't stand up, when something is wrong, when something is unjust. And eventually you heal. I mean, and eventually time is the only thing that's on your side, and eventually you piece your life back together, because you don't have a choice. You have to, you have to survive life, you have to live life, and you have to overcome. I mean, overcoming it, you're asking, how did I overcome it? I mean, in some ways I didn't. And I think in some ways, a lot of the work that I've done in later life has been because of that, has been because of knowing what that feels like, feeling sort of abandoned, feeling like you don't belong to anybody. I always sort of try to explain it to people, like, when you're at the airport and you have suitcases going around on the luggage belt, and somebody comes, they take that suitcase and it belongs to them, they go home, next one, and there's always, there's like 1 or 2 bags left, and they keep going and nobody comes. And I felt like that. I felt like that suitcase, that piece of luggage that nobody came for. Nobody came and claimed and said, you know what, this is mine. So I felt like this kind of just dangling, kind of unclaimed person. And it's hard. That's hard.
And there is so many people that feel the same. So it is important for you to mention this, also because it is incredible to know that I don't know how many years later we're still having this feeling as Indian sons and daughters. And it is important to come at peace with this, but also to explain that we can be both, or that we can, but you were a teenager, so it was even more difficult for you to arrive in a new country. You faced physical threats, so you had also to protect yourself. So it was not really a choice, it was more of something that you were compelled to do because of the environment you were living in.
But it takes, I mean, eventually I do think that, whatever that brokenness is, or whatever happens at that point in, all of our, or many of our lives, eventually, or for many people, eventually you do heal from it, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just find different ways of coping with it, and you find a place for it in your life. And for me, I think that kind of gap, or that kind of brokenness, was there for a really long time. And it's not until, I would say, quite later in life, like, almost even around sort of 10 years since now, or 10 years ago, sorry, that I started to sort of rebuild from that and realize that from this kind of brokenness is actually where I need to, that's exactly what I can't run away from it. Actually, that's what I need to dig up properly and really work with and speak about it. Because as you say, this is unfortunately not just my experience. Of course, the specifics of my experience is my experience, but this feeling that you're left with as a child growing up in, predominantly white countries, as a child of immigrants, as a child that, looks different and is dark-skinned, and comes from all these other languages and all this other sort of life. So many of us struggle with that. And when I made the jihad film, for example, in my mind, I have had I've had problems with men like that my whole life, and I've been afraid of men like that my whole life, right? So that's the sort of place I came from when I was making the film. But what I was so amazed by at the time, and now it makes complete sense. Now I don't understand why I was so amazed by it, but listening to them and listening to their stories, every single thing they said about growing up in England as a brown boy, Muslim boy, I was thinking, me too. I feel like that. Me too. Me too. Me too. Me too. Me too. And the only point where we separated was how they chose to deal with it, and how I chose to deal with it. That's it. That's the only difference. Everything else was almost 100%. The feelings that it left them was the same. So what I've come to realize is that when we grow up like that, we will find a way to cope with it. Some ways of coping could be productive and creative and healthy. Other ways of coping with it is destructive and bad for you and bad for the society. But we will find a way to deal with it because we have to, because there's a certain level of trauma even in that we are not taught how to deal with. Our society doesn't even recognize it as a certain kind of trauma that a lot of our children are growing up with. But, you know, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. I've talked to so many young people that were born and raised or have grown up in Western countries, in European countries, and they all carry something like this with them. And it makes me so sad. It breaks my heart because one of the things I thought growing up is my case is special. My case, maybe it's just me, maybe something wrong with me because I'm going through this. And the second thing I used to think, time will fix it. Next generations won't have to deal with it. And they are having to deal with it. In some ways, even worse.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, when I look at what's happening around in some different countries now, when we talk about radicalization, we talk about all these different things, people only look at it at the very surface. They just look at the literally the explosion part of it. They don't look at everything that brought them to that point. And until we do that, we don't solve it.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely. And what I find fascinating, not only in the movie that you mentioned, but in many other movies that you made, is that you always try to find, you show compassion and you try to find the human side of the people that you interview or that you meet. For example, in this jihadist documentary, one would think that you will cover violence, hate, and this, you know, powerful narrative of being a terrorist. But what you actually show is, you know, former terrorists that actually came back to the UK and understood where the mistake was, and they cry and they show that they are just as human as us, but they are often portrayed by media in very polarizing ways. So this makes them unhuman, whereas everybody has the right to a second chance. And so it is important to do this also rehabilitation process in order to make sure that the next generation will not make the same mistakes, right?
Yeah.
You put also yourself in a lot of danger by interviewing terrorists, but also, for example, your first movie was Benaz, who was, it really touched my heart, and it was about a case of honor killing, a young woman in the UK that was killed. And my question is how to cover such sensitive topics, and also sensitives in terms of culture and differences in culture without being stereotypical.
It's a really good question, and it's been something that has been very conscious in my mind that this is a big problem, because very often what we see stories of women from immigrant communities and especially Muslim women, stories being sort of hijacked by people that use our stories for political gain, and that use our stories actually to create more division and to say, see, look at these people, see what they do, this is why they shouldn't be here, right? So it's sort of a stories that people use against our men in a way, I feel like, and against the entire communities. And my kind of solution, or my way of thinking about it, was, first of all, some of these cases do happen. You know, so I'm not making it up. Society isn't making it up. It is happening. So first of all, we have to admit and acknowledge that it's going on. But I think the way that the story is told is very important. The story of Banaz was a very well-known story all across England. It was covered a lot in the media. But one of the reasons, because that's the first film I made, and one of the reasons I started making films in the first place is my frustration and my disappointment in how stories about people from minorities is often told. It's often told in a shock and awe kind of way. It's often told, I think, in a dehumanizing way, even for the women that they claim to be, you know, feel so bad for. I feel like they also take away the women's power because they only feel bad for them. You know, Banaz did everything right, actually, Banaz was actually a very strong, very bright, amazing young woman who did every single thing you're supposed to do. She went to the police, she asked for the help, she did all of that, and she was still treated like this. So for me, it's a matter of actually being honest and truthful, and admitting both that this does happen within some families, but also that the aspect of racism also exists, because the betrayal of Banaz comes both from her family and her community, but it also comes from the wider British society. Her going to the police in London 5 times, asking for help, not being believed, not getting the support that she needs, also speaks to the ignorance. Best case, it's ignorance and people not understanding what kind of support women need, or maybe it's racism too. Right? Whatever it is, it's unacceptable. So I think even in her story, and even in stories like that, you are always going to find this dynamic of the pressures and the kind of abuse from within our own communities, and the pressure and the abuse and the discrimination from our countries. And so I think that friction is very important to put forward, that she's betrayed actually by all of us, not just by people who look like that, but all of us, which is the truth.
Yeah, from the society at large.
Yeah, and I think we also have to be vocal. I think one of the ways that you counter this narrative that people want to promote is, oh, look at all just these victimized Muslim women. You also have to tell the stories of the strength and the courage and the brilliance of Muslim women, and you also have to be loud and clear about all the other forms of abuse that we also face. We don't just face this, we also face racism, we also face Islamophobia, we also face classism, we face all of that as well. So I think it's very important to be complete and to try to tell our experiences in as complicated and as multi-layered, truthful ways as humanly possible. And once you do that, it becomes very difficult for racists then to misuse our stories for their own game, you know?
They're telling the bigger picture, showing the bigger picture and telling a broader story that is not just, narrowing or
just that. Yeah,
and especially you're giving back this agency to women, because
to her, exactly.
Yeah, but even in other documentaries, for example, in the Jihadist one, you also speak about women that decide to join those groups, and often there is this stereotype that a woman is following the husband, or that we lack of agency. But it is important to recognize this agency and this choice that women make, because we're not only victims and mere passive actors, but we can also, first of all, contribute in society in positive ways, and try to, as Banaz did, for example, in the documentary, as you showed, she tried to change her situation.
She did. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's the sort of one of the biggest problems, that I think the way that in public our stories are told, that's the problem that I have, is that it does remove and reduce our agency. It diminishes our humanity completely. It removes any dignity that we have. It removes any kind of courage and strength and brilliance that is there. And it flattens us. It just flattens us down to a stereotype of she's a victim, or she's just a crazy jihadi who just wants to blow everybody up, right? So those are the two kind of layers that we're allowed to have. And obviously, the human experience is far more complicated than that. But that complexity is never, or very rarely, afforded to us. It's given to everybody. It's given to women who are white European women. Mm-hmm. They can have contradictions. They can be multi-layered. They can have regret. They can have agency. They can have all of it. But we cannot somehow. And so, I sort of came to the point of realizing that we have to start telling our own stories and share our own experiences, because if we don't do that, other people will do it for us, and other people have been doing it for us. And what it's been doing is that it's actually been erasing our true experience. And it's through a completely different lens than what it actually is. And that's not okay. And because that's part of the reason why our society also doesn't understand itself and each other very well. It's also because most people, we understand each other and ourselves through stories. Huge parts of the population in any European country has never met a Muslim.
Yeah.
for example, has never met. The only place that they meet a Muslim is on the news. Right? So it's on the news, or it's in the stories that they read in the newspapers. So if that's the only experience that you have, if that's the only relationship that you have, the only meeting that you've had with a Muslim, then of course you're going to be afraid of Muslims. You know, of course you're only going to think that they're these 2 or 3 things, and those 2 or 3 things are usually horrible things. You know, so the stories have to change, and the stories have to broaden, I think, and the storytellers also have to change.
Definitely. And both on media, but also on the entertainment industry, you always see the same characters attributed to brown people. So it is important also to challenge these and to reflect on which roles, but also owning our stories. And then you say reclaiming your narrative and being sure that you are speaking for yourself, and that what you say and what you show as a path, as a story, is true to the reality. You also covered very important topics, especially your last 2 movies. They were more focused on the United States. So you made a movie on white supremacy and what it means to be an extremist, but motivated by racial ideologies. So I would love to make a parallel with the European context, because we see a lot of narratives being fostered, nourished by this polarization and this division and this ordering minorities. So what do you think about this? Do you think that we are seeing a global movement inspired by the US? Or do you think that there is, you know, a European specificity because of our historic, you know, our past, our colonial past, but also, you know, fascism and Nazism?
I think so. So the reason I wanted to do the films about America is because all of these dynamics are very loud and very clear. You can see it very easily in America, and you can see it very easily through a leader like, you know, Trump. But the reality is that we have our own mini Trumps all across Europe. We have those same tendencies, those same policies, that same polarization, that same othering, these same divisions everywhere. And that's not because of Trump. You know, it's what's happening in France, what's happened, you know, what's happening all across Europe is not because of Trump. It's Trump just gives us a window through which we can grab hold of a lot of these issues, where we can see it very, very, very clearly, and it's maybe not as subtle as it might be across Europe. So I think that the parallel is absolutely there. In fact, I think that we have some added complicated layers, that some of what you've just mentioned as well, which is the colonialism, which is Nazism, which is, you know, all these other dimensions to the problems that we have. But I think overarching all of this, you know, the world is changing, in the sense of, you know, the movement of people, the you know, all the crises that have, well, actually the US has contributed to that, you know, all the wars and the violent conflicts that have taken place, you know, since 9/11 all across the Middle East, North Africa as well, you know, there are consequences to that. You know, you can't just drop bombs on people and think that problem will just remain there. Obviously, there are consequences. And when those consequences now have knocked on the doors of some of these countries, everybody's looking away. When it was time to make coalitions to go bomb people, everybody was there going, pick me, pick me, pick me. We want to go too. We want to go too. Yeah. So now when the consequences of that is coming home, nobody wants to deal with it. And unfortunately, you know, white supremacists and these kind of extreme nationalists that are in every single country across Europe, they are wanting to ignore, and again, this is part of the stories that are being told or are not being told to them. They're wanting to ignore that, and all they see is that you've got all these brown and black people coming into my country, coming into my street, coming into my neighborhood, and the world and my environment as I know it visibly is changing. And so that's it. That's the container, and I feel uncomfortable with that. The people that are living there feel. I think the fear that comes with uncertainty and something that you don't know, something that you don't understand, I understand that. I actually have compassion for that. I understand that this is not easy for people. You know, in one way, we can talk about diversity as a really beautiful thing, because it is. But for many people who are not used to diversity, it's a terrifying thing. And our societies are also not making it particularly easy to make those transitions, to make the communities sort of come together, or to create spaces or opportunities for people to share and really actually get to understand and build a relationship with each other. We've just thrown a lot of different people together and gone, make it work. Integration, let's do that. Let's do diversity. Let's do all these words that sound really great, but they don't mean anything if you don't put an effort into it. You know, so people are sort of just thrown into this without any kind of support, in a way. And I always sort of try to say to people, integration or coexistence, I don't even always like the word integration, but, you know, coexistence, it's about human relationships. It's about people living with each other, with each other's faults, with each other's beauty, with each other's everything. And, you know, human relationships are very difficult, even when they are intimate relationships with our families or our friends or our partners or our children and our siblings. Even those are hard. You know, and many of those relationships we choose to be in. On a societal level, our leaders and our societies have not sort of made a commitment to each other. In our personal relationship, we make a commitment. I am your friend, or I am your partner. I commit to you, and we will stay in this relationship no matter how difficult it gets. We'll stick through it, even in the hard times. And so we do. Sometimes we don't manage, but at least we try. And there's that mutual understanding. On a societal level, our leaders have never articulated that we are in this together. We are going to make this relationship work. It is going to be difficult, and it's okay. All relationships are difficult. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be some ugliness, but there's also going to be incredible beauty, incredible creativity, incredible contribution, incredible bond and human connection with each other. And whatever comes, we will make it work, because we're together in this, and we will get through it. Whatever it is, we will get through it. On a societal level, we've never made that commitment to each other. And in Europe, especially, we've not. I mean, look at Brexit, look at a lot of things that are happening. People said to me, oh, you know, look at France, look at Germany, look at Hungary, look at all these places. You know, most of these places, the level of votes that sort of hyper-nationalists have gotten, anti-immigrant politicians and anti-immigrant parties have gotten, is mind-blowing. It's actually terrifying.
It is.
You know, and people aren't talking about that. It's easy to talk about Trump, but the point of talking about Trump is then we need to take that, and then we need to self-reflect and look at, so what are we doing in our context? And what we are doing in our context is we are ignoring. We are looking away as these resentments build within the you know, pre-existing, you know, populations in these countries, where the fear is growing, when the hate, which is turning into hatred, and the desire for violence is growing. And then you've got the immigrant populations that are also being shunned and pushed aside and cast aside and minimized. Also resentments growing, fears growing, divisions and this thing growing. So what's happening? The fractures between our societies are deepening. The misunderstandings between our populations are growing rather than being bridged and being us coming together. So I think we are looking at a difficult time ahead. I think we are looking at very big challenges, but I do think that it is possible to do something about it, and a lot of people are doing a lot about it. But it's time to take this very seriously, and I think it's very important that we also across borders in Europe also start linking arms and building solidarity with people who are trying to create the future that includes all of us and that belongs to all of us, and articulates the possibilities of what's possible in a positive way, not just in a negative way, which is the only thing that's being done right now, is we are a problem.
Yeah, definitely. What I often say is that there is this industry of hate. And whether it is religious motivated or politically motivated by far-right narratives, it is working very well in exploiting our fear, our diversity and differences, and saying that, look, these people can't live together. And
Yeah.
when you mention about Europe and European countries becoming more and more, polarized and far-right driven, as an Italian, I can't help but saying, just a year ago, we had a far-right politician as a minister of interior that people voted for, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It unfortunately didn't surprise me, because for a long time, these narratives of immigration being a problem, even just my father marrying my mother who is Italian, half of my family doesn't talk to me. So, we grow up knowing that this is it. This is how it is. And there is racism, you have to deal with it. And because we didn't make peace with our, fascist past and our, racist culture that is still very embedded in our society, then we can't really tackle what's coming up for the future.
Yeah.
So it is important.
No, but I also feel I agree with you. I think the fascist past has not been, unpicked properly by many countries. I mean, in Germany, obviously it's a bit different, but also I think that the aspect that's not being tackled properly, or that's not being sort of highlighted enough, is why are these people here? Yeah. First of all, why are immigrants and all these people here? Number one, and what is our contribution as country A, B, C, D in involvement in their countries that has brought them all here, or many of them here? Secondly, the immigrants and the refugees that have come, what has been their contribution to the societies? Yeah, the contribution is not terrorism. That's the only contribution we get to wear around our neck. What else? What else have these countries done? And, I've spoken to so many, first, second, third generation immigrants of all different backgrounds. And one of the things that I repeatedly keep hearing, and I completely can relate to it, is it feels like you are wanted when there's a problem, when they need you to rebuild your country after the Second World War, when they need you to go be a soldier and die on the front line. It's okay. When they need you to clean your toilets, when they need you to do all these other things that basically the original the previous population doesn't want to deal with, then it's okay. But when it comes to asking for dignity, when it comes to asking for equality and for equal rights and equal opportunity and just equality in humanity as well, that no, don't want that. And also, as I say, all relationships also come with problems. I'm not saying all immigrants are beautiful, all immigrants are perfect. The whole premise is immigrants and children of immigrants are no different than any other human being. The entire spectrum of what it means to be a human being, the beauty and the ugliness of that, and the criminality and all of the stuff that people like to talk about, all of that exists amongst immigrants in the same way that it exists in the white population, right? But we never, now there's going to be a COVID vaccine, and it's interesting that it's potentially by Turkish Muslims, right? Yeah. But the kind of attention that gets versus if they were to strap a bomb on themselves and walk into a shopping center, the attention is completely different. So yes, some Muslims take life. Yes, some Muslims save lives. Yeah. Right? Just like with a white French person or a white German or a white Norwegian. Some of them take life, some of them protect life and save life. So why we are not allowed the entire spectrum of what it means to be a human is dehumanizing and racist in and of itself. Right? So yes, so there's a lot to confront, and there's a lot to, but the only kind of place that I keep returning to is we have to be open and honest, and we have to be compassionate. And one thing that I refuse to do is a lot of my friends become really angry, and they say, look, I don't want to deal with these racists, I don't want to deal with fascists, I don't want to deal with whites, all these people. And I understand that, I actually really do. But I also think that when we talk about inclusion and we talk about how can we coexist, coexistence means coexisting with people that you also don't like, of any variety. So that kind of compassion, I guess what I'm saying is I also don't want to dehumanize the people who dehumanize me, because I feel like then the cycle never ends. And I think the only way to stop this never-ending hate and fear and division and polarization, the only way you put a wedge through it is you refuse to participate in that. Even if you might be legitimate in your feelings about that person, it still is not the right way to behave. It's still not the kind of society that we want to live in. It's not the kind of human being, at least I want to be in the society that I live in. Even though nobody would blame me for even punching a Nazi, people would go, oh, yeah, do it, it's fine, right? But that's not how this ends. That's not how this moves forward in a positive way. Speaking of Trump, I know a lot of people are celebrating at the moment that Biden-Harris will be the new administration, and I'm very relieved as well. Yeah. But the reality is, 70 million, a minimum of 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. So when they're talking about rebuilding and rehealing and reuniting the country, it has to also include them. It has to, and it has to include them with respect and with dignity and by speaking to their hearts as well. So that's the thing. It's, to me, diversity and inclusion it actually really does mean all of us. It doesn't mean just brown and black people get to participate. It means everybody, we get to share and we get to be in this thing, this messy thing called life together, and so many people that are afraid and that sort of do carry racist or Islamophobic or anti-immigrant views with them, they are sincerely afraid. And I think that fear has to be acknowledged, and that fear has to be spoken about properly in a respectful way. And I think, because I think a lot of those people feel that by you and I gaining rights and gaining opportunities, for example, and participation in these societies, that is happening at their expense. And that's just not true. It's not happening at their expense. It's possible for it to be him and me. Yeah. It doesn't have to be me or him. It's not either or. It can be both. Yeah. And so that has to be articulated. And if our politicians aren't doing it, then it has to come from us. Then it has to be, at a community level.
Definitely. And you have a deep understanding of what it means to be afraid of the other. You met many people that might have very different views from you, but you always go with an open heart and an open mind and being ready to understand. And so we can sense it when you explain how you see society, how you want to see society, but also what needs to be done in order to overcome those fears. So thanks a lot for this. And it is, an experience, a lifelong experience that you had that made you realize how important it is to foster dialogue. And I know that if I have to describe you with one word, I would say courage, because you often put yourself at risk in order to meet these people, and often you're even attacked, but you don't mind because you just want to show that behind these narratives, these hateful narratives, there is humans that are actually just afraid or just,
yes,
sometimes indoctrinated or even lied. Yeah. They're told misfacts.
Yeah.
So I'm
and it's
yeah.
No, I do feel that. I do feel that it's the human being has to be at the beating heart of any kind of interaction. And I think, even they, whether it was the jihadi or it was the white supremacy, whatever kind of extremist I've talked to, even they don't want me to see them as a human being. Yeah. Because then their story is the way that they want it to be. The image that they want me to have of them remains, which is, I am afraid of you because you're this big, scary monster guy who's very violent and you're aggressive and you're all of this. And, very many times people like that, they're just looking for dignity. They're just looking for respect. They're also covering over some sort of humiliation and brokenness in their own life and some kind of lack in their own life by kind of overcompensating by being this roar. Because people being afraid of them in some ways sometimes ends up feeling like maybe, respect and fear sometimes can feel the same, right? So they feel like, well, at least that's as close as I will get. They know they will never be the good guy of the story, so they're okay being the bad guy because at least you're a part of the story. At least you're included, even though it's a negative thing. And to me, precisely because they don't want me to see them as a human being, is why I want to go to that part of them, is why I want to see if it's possible to get closer to their heart of who they actually really are. Because once you get to that part is when you actually start relating to each other on a human level. And that's what we need. It's all this noise in between that has to be removed. All of that has to be put to one side, because that is there to be a distraction, to actually keep us separated, to keep the distance from each other, because it's easier.
Yeah,
it's easier to do all that stuff, and the name calling and all that stuff. And, and social media makes that very easy too. It removes, it creates more distance rather than actually remove it. And I think intimacy and real human connection and real bonds is what we need. And we need ways of encouraging that. And one of the only ways to do that I have found is we have to be willing to listen to each other, even to people that we don't like, even to people that we disagree with, and even people that we don't want to listen to. And compassion, for example, is also something that has to be extended to people who might not deserve it.
Yeah.
But that's the point of compassion.
And it's
the point of compassion. It's exactly, and it's the strength. And it doesn't mean that all racists will be reformed and all racists will stop being, what they are, or all jihadis will stop, the terrorists will stop doing terrorism. But I do think that some people among those groups can actually be reached. And I think what we have to resist the urge or the kind of impulse is to become like them. In our actions, in our sort of hatred towards them, we also have to resist that we don't become that. Yeah. That we don't start othering people. We don't start dehumanizing people. We don't start removing people's dignity away from them. Even if they, might deserve to be treated badly, it doesn't mean that that's what you do. Because either you have the principles that you have, either you stand by what you say, the words that you believe in, or you don't. And if you don't stand by the values that you say, then those are not values. If I'm only willing to extend my values to you, because you are like me, and I like you, and I respect you, and we think in similar way, we view the world, that's pointless. That's easy. That's why the echo chambers are so dangerous, is we are only surrounding ourselves with people that we love and we like and we respect and we agree with. Life is not about that. Life is about coexisting with people that you disagree with and still finding a space, not to change each other's mind, but finding a place where we have to coexist, where that is the bottom line understanding. Is that's fine. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to like me, but we have to do this peacefully, because the alternative to dialogue, the alternative to peaceful coexistence is violence. Yeah. And that's why we're seeing the bursts in the way that we are seeing them, And so that to me is an unacceptable outcome, is violence. And dialogue and listening and empathy is the antidote to that.
Great. I really like this, because it's precisely what you try to explain through your documentaries, but also it is important to understand that even in a digitalized world as we are, even though we might not hear in front of us when we walk in the street a person insulting us, the fact that the person does it behind the screen, or the fact that the person does it by voting for Trump, that has hateful views, it means that people still think it, and so we have to address it. And so we have to,
because it won't go away.
Yeah,
exactly, because it won't go away. That's exactly, you've hit it exactly on the head. We can pretend to be polite to each other in the street, but if you vote a certain way, and as soon as you come home and you go on Twitter and you start bashing a woman, or you start saying all kinds of awful things, or threatening or being abusive or whatever, we have to bring it out into the light, and we have to address it, and we have to unpick it and talk about this. Otherwise, this will get worse and worse and worse, and it'll become uglier and uglier. And speech will become more restricted, not more open, actually. No, you're exactly right. And I think, and that's one of the things that I've sort of learned as well, because a lot of people, when I did the film about the white supremacists, before they saw it, they said, don't give them a platform, don't let them talk, why are you doing this? You should be making films about women. You should be why are you talking to these people? And I said, it's because I'm not supposed to, is exactly why I should. And I said, I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. I know what it feels like to be the other. I know what it feels like to be spat at in the face, or to be threatened, or to be dehumanized. I'm not going to do, because I know what it feels like, I'm not going to do it to somebody else. And also, just because I look the other way, or just because I shout at him, it doesn't make his feelings go away. It actually makes it stronger. I need there to be less racists and less white supremacists, not to pat myself on the back for going, I shouted at one. Aren't I a great anti-racist? Yay, I'm so brave, I'm so cool because I shouted at one or threw something. I've done that too, mind you, in the past. I have done that, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
And we need these knots and these tensions to be unpicked and become smaller, not bigger. So we need to put all of this under the light and actually address it, rather than allow it to disappear farther and farther underground, because it actually gains strength. It gathers strength. While we were all thinking 10, 15, 20 years ago, oh, things are getting better, things are becoming more blah, 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 it was getting worse, because this was actually growing underneath the surface. And because we weren't allowed to have open, honest conversations, and the people who are afraid weren't allowed to say that they're afraid, because when they said they're afraid, instantly they're called a racist as well, right? So conversation on that side is completely shut down. We also don't want to hear them. So all that has to somehow change. But at the same time, you know, many of my feminist friends, many of, you know, Muslim women as well say, you know, I'm unwilling to engage with people like that. And I said, look, that's okay. You shouldn't have to. And it is not the burden of a victimized people to have to reform their abuser. I understand that. And I very much understand that. But I do think that for some of us who want to be in that space and who do want to look him in the eye and want to talk to him, we should do that. The fight is so big. This is such a great struggle. This is so many challenges that we have, that every talent, every way of engagement has to be on the table. All hands on deck are needed. If somebody wants to write about it, they should. If somebody has an NGO, they should. If it's in the schools, we should. If somebody's wanting to go one-on-one, they should. All of these sort of ways of communication and engagement need to be there. And some of the engagement is just about healing some of our own communities. And that's important too, you know? So I'm not saying do what I'm doing. I'm not saying that, basically. You know, I'm not saying what I'm doing, everybody should do that. I understand that's not realistic as well.
Of course, I mean, everybody has its own boundaries and the way to respond to hate.
Exactly.
And I have to say, there is this industry of hate, but also an industry of love. It's just that the industry of hate is much more loud, and they have a very simplistic way of passing their message. Whereas in order to build on peace and inclusion and love and actually understand and dialogue, it takes more time. It takes people to actually meet each other and, as you say, showing compassion. But it's a crucial job to do. And we need to be, as I say, more louder. We need to be louder. We need to also have easier messages to spread and to be understood as much as the other side. But thank you a lot. And I know that you choose a camera as a tool for impact, despite all the discrimination and all the options that you had. You could have done so many more things, even just, you know, living and you know, changing completely your career, but you actually dedicated your work and your life to building dialogue and telling another story. So my last question for you will be, what's your advice to those listening to us who want to promote inclusion and who might, you know, face the same challenges that you faced or similar ones? Especially young women.
Especially what?
Young women that are listening.
Young women.
But,
you know, I think there are, well, first of all, I wouldn't wait. If there is something that you want to do, don't wait. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for somebody else to open the door for you. Open it yourself. If there's not a seat at the table for you, then set up your own table. set up new structures. You know, the reason I set up my own company and don't work in existing production companies is not because I have a problem with it necessarily, but I want to not just tell stories that are different, but I also want to do the work that I do with the kinds of people that I want to work with, and also in the way that I want to work. So I don't like some of the structures that exist. So the only way to deal with it, for me anyway, is to create my own little ecosystem of an alternative structure where respect and dignity and love is the foundation of even the company, not just in what I say to you. So I would say don't wait. And I would say, don't wait for permission from anybody, because it's not going to come necessarily. So you have to give yourself permission, work harder than anybody else around you. And no matter what you do, you must hold on to your heart. That's the most precious thing you have, is you must hold on to your heart, and you must listen to your heart. When I finally decided to stop sort of performing the roles that society and everybody expected of me as a woman, and as a woman of color, and as a Muslim woman, I made a commitment to myself that I'm only going to follow my heart, only going to listen to my heart, and then I will deal with whatever consequences come. If that means I eat every 2 days, I'm willing to accept that consequence. If that means I don't own a home, I will do that. I don't care. If it means I don't have this, or I don't have that, or I can't do this and I can't do that, I don't really care, because we always pay a price in life. So pay the price in life for something that you truly care about, that you truly love, because then the price doesn't feel like a price. It just, the love for what you are doing and why you are doing it is very important, very, very important. And I would suggest always checking back in with your heart to make sure that you are still staying true to you, and that you're not becoming kind of cluttered with the kind of noise out there and of what people want from you and what they expect from you. And, you know, just hold on to your integrity and be sincere, be honest with yourself. And you know, when it comes to compassion, as much as it's important, I think, to be a compassionate person in the world, I think as women, we also forget to be compassionate to ourselves. So I think don't forget that. Make sure that that's always front and center, because if you are compassionate to yourself, you'll have the capacity to be it to other people too. So I would say you have to stay true to who you really are, and always, always listen to your heart, no matter what people around you say. It's never going to lead you to the wrong place.
Thank you so much. So inspiring and important advice that you give to all of us. Thank you a lot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you are doing. Thank you for, seriously, thank you for being you, and for being out there doing the hard work that you're doing. And also, you know, being yourself and living out loud as truthfully as you can be yourself. That in and of itself, you know how we talk about, you know, fear is contagious, hatred is contagious, all of that is contagious. You know, hope is contagious. I think love is contagious. I think being truly who you are is also contagious, because people see that it's possible, and it's okay to just be you. It's more than okay. It's what we want. You know, it's what the world needs. And I would also say to women, and to you also, is that you are exactly what our world and this time is calling for. And what you have in you to offer to the world, and what you have in you to contribute to the world, is exactly what we need. So we need you, and we need the women that are watching this, especially now, because I think that's where the solutions are ultimately. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I can say the same for you, and I'm very, very happy to have you with us, and for the work that you carry, so important, and for the words that you're sharing to all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Lots of love. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, talking in this pandemic world about positive stuff that is contagious is so inspiring as well, after all these inspiring words. And I think, and I hope it's crystal clear that it's not a mistake that you are our awardee. When I heard it in the beginning, I was a bit like, wow, okay, no, I mean, it was so inspiring listening to you, to both of you actually. And I really appreciate both of your times. It was really, really cool to have you. And I hope we will have the opportunity again. Thank you so much.
I would love that. I would love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making this possible. I'm so very grateful. There are not enough words, so thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you a lot.